And let's just start and get right into it with Echo, because this is the thing I saw. And for those of you who don't know, this is the first thing coming out of Marvel's Spotlight division, which is fascinating to me because this is supposed to be a division that they opened up specifically for content that you don't have to have a prerequisite for. In other words, you don't have to have seen everything else to have enjoyed their Spotlight content. So this is the first thing that they're putting out in that
Yeah, it's like
division.
really the only thing you would have to see is probably like Hawkeye.
You don't even have to see that though. That's why I liked about this, which I'll get into in a second.
True.
I'll tell you why. Even though it takes place in the MCU, it takes place in the same universe and everything. What I think this did a really good job at, it's in the first 10 minutes. It sets up Hawkeye. You'll be
True.
rewarded if you've seen Hawkeye, but you don't necessarily have to have seen Hawkeye. So for those of you
That is true. I
who are
guess yeah,
like,
I guess you get enough. You get enough from Echo in the show of Echo from
right,
Hawkeye that you don't really have to watch. Yeah.
and for those of you who are like, I want to watch MCU stuff, that I am not caught up on everything else, the Spotlight stuff is going to be for you. And so I was fascinated by this move when they talked about Spotlight. And for those of you who don't know, so it is spun off of Hawkeye. The character of Maya is from Hawkeye, and she is pretty much dealing with the aftermath of shooting her uncle in the eyeball. That is basically the plot of this show. Kingpin is a very popular character from Daredevil, and the comics, obviously, and everything. But mainly this version of Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio, is popular from Daredevil, and he plays Maya's uncle. And in Hawkeye, she shot him in the eyeball right at the end of the series, and we're dealing with the aftermath of that. How does Maya deal with that? And the first thing I want to say right out the bat, so I already kind of complimented the fact that they set this up in a way where you did not have to have seen, you wouldn't have had to have seen Hawkeye to understand what's going on. They recapped that very well. They kind of re-edit it and reframe it from Maya's perspective. So part A, they did that extremely well in this show. The other thing I want to compliment is I believe the pronunciation's Lakewood Cox, so I apologize if I'm butchering that. I think that her performance was great. She led a show much better than I would have thought she would have after seeing Hawkeye, because after seeing Hawkeye, when this Echo series got announced, I was like, I have no interest in this when it got announced. The trailer got me kind of hyped because the trailer looked cool. And this is also, we should mention, the first TVMA rated MCU show as well, which doesn't deliver on that promise. Let's get right into that. So I like this thing. I'm going to tell you right now, right off the bat, I enjoyed Echo. I might be in the minority, and that's okay. I think a lot of people were expecting something more akin to Daredevil, and I can't really blame anybody for that based on the marketing. But what I will tell you, Jose, is that this show, it delivers something I think a lot more beautiful than I was expecting by the end of it, because of the direction it takes. And I'll tell you, I was getting kind of worried in episode 2. I think episode 2 has the most amount of pacing problems. And the other thing I would also mention about this show is that right around episode 2, there's a new character called Biscuits. I did not like this character at all. I think
Oh yeah,
that I found him
he
annoying.
was sort of he was kind of first put in at season 1. I remember.
Season 1.
Episode 1 he was in.
Oh,
This
episode
there
1.
was a guy
I'm
called
sorry. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah
episode
yeah
1, he is put in. He's introduced, and there's a character called Biscuits, and I'm sorry. I should have said he's more prominent in episode 2, and that's when he started to annoy me a lot more, because he just, I don't know. This guy is just not for me. That's the best way I could say it. But how I will say, one of the things that I like about that character being in the show, even though he wasn't for me, he annoyed me, is I think that a lot of people are going to relate to that character. I think there are people like that character that are going to relate to that character. And that's all I'll say. And I don't mean that as an insult to anybody. I just think that a lot of people will relate to that character. It just wasn't for me, that character. I think that they tried to play him as a comedic relief. Another thing that was in the marketing was that this show was supposed to be more grounded, more real, more gritty. And in a lot of ways, it definitely is. I think that the mindset of all of us, especially the ones that didn't like Hawkeye, I liked Hawkeye, by the way, but I think for the
same.
people that didn't like Hawkeye, they're like, we don't want any tracksuit mafia type stuff, no corny stuff. They're in there. There's still these corny villains that are side heroes. However, I will say it's much more anchored by Kingpin here than it was in Hawkeye, so it kind of balances itself out. I do think that there are some really great character actors in here that play villain roles that do kind of anchor the sort of corniness of some of the other side villains. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. By episode 3, though, I was just out the edge of my seat and in suspense. I think that there are some things that they still do past episode 3 that are still just a little goofy, but I was able to get past most of it because I was just invested in this uncle and niece storyline for the most part. And also, I did love learning about Maya's background. I love learning about the Choctaw culture. I thought that was integrated very well into the show. I'm hearing a lot of criticisms from people saying it wasn't. I don't know. I'm saying this as a straight white male. I thought that it worked extremely well for everything they did. So I genuinely enjoyed that element of it personally. I found a lot of enjoyment in this. Even in the beginning of episode 2, there's a scene where we're just sitting with the Choctaw culture and they just opened it up to the IMAX ratio just to show us that a little bit better, and I thought that stuff played extremely well. I enjoyed a lot of the creative choices too. There were moments where they played like a silent film in here, which I thought was just a super dope creative choice. I thought the thing was shot very well. It does deliver on a lot of the violence, but I think that the problem a lot of people are going to have, not me necessarily, is it tends to move past that grounded, gritty violence and it kind of goes into a more character driven story without the violence. So I think a lot of people will have issue with that. Myself personally, I enjoyed what we got out of it. I will say you could tell it's chopped down a bit. It's condensed, but not nearly as much as say something like the Marvels was. Like you don't notice it as much as that. It doesn't feel as bumpy of a ride as something like that, or even Ant-Man for that matter. I think that this movie definitely, or this TV series was definitely worth excuse me, having it in a binge because I was able to really appreciate the entire vision at once, and I think that a lot of people need to watch it in a binge, not complain about the fact it was in a binge at this particular case, even though I do prefer the week to week in any other case. I could see why they threw this out in a binge. A lot of people were speculating it's because Marvel didn't have faith in it or whatever, and that might be true. So I might be in a minority here when I say that I actually got a lot of enjoyment out of this, even though I did see some very clear flaws throughout it. Wasn't as great as, say, Loki season 2, but I do think it is a good start for Marvel for myself anyway. I think that this is a good start to the year for the MCU for myself. I'm very excited to see what's next, which will be Deadpool 3. The last thing I will mention
Mhm.
is Daredevil, because we all know he's going to be in the show. That's not a spoiler. That was in the trailer. This is an example of, I gotta say, bad fan service in this show. I did not like the Daredevil cameo in this thing. I thought this is a pure example. Like, I was talking to some friends when Ahsoka was out, right? And I said Anakin was fan service. It was good fan service though, because it served the story of Ahsoka and drove that character forward. I was telling some friends that when that show was on, and they were like, "What's bad fan service?" This is bad fan service. I did not like the Daredevil cameo. It could have been anybody in that role. Maya could have fought anybody in that moment because ultimately it didn't need to be Daredevil. The fact that Daredevil was there was to me bad fan service. He was just there to be there. Not that I minded the fight scene with Daredevil, by the way, and you guys will know what I'm
Ooh,
talking about. It was a great fight scene. I just think
for
it could have
sure.
been any character. It didn't need to be Daredevil. It didn't have any
Mm,
bearing on the story overall by the end of
That's
it. So
fair.
that's where I was
That's
at.
fair.
So that to me that's an example of bad fan service. However, once I got past all that, because again, I was into the fight itself. I thought the choreography was really well done. I think both of these, Charlie Cox and Alec Cox worked very hard to get the fight choreography down, and I thought it looked great.
Facts.
I do see a lot of comparisons to Daredevil's choreography, and people saying it's not as good. I think it's pretty good. It's just doesn't look exactly the same as something we would have gotten in Daredevil. So I think I wish people would give it a break a little bit, but overall, guys, I found Echo to be an enjoyable binge. I do hope you guys go check it out. And I know Jose, you got like an episode into it, right? So I mean, what were your thoughts
Yeah, I
so
got
far?
so I've finished. Yeah, I got to finish episode one in between my classes today. Because I totally forgot that it came out yesterday.
Yeah.
Sorry. But when I was scrolling through YouTube on my computer, I saw that a couple of YouTube channels had already put like at least the first two episodes, their like breakdowns and stuff in the reviews. I was like, oh crap, I totally forgot this was out. So I went and watched the first episode in between classes. And honestly, what I saw in the first episode so far has really excited me for the rest of the show. Um, some of my gripes, I mean, one is that it's 5 episodes and not six, like normal seasons of Marvel shows.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
but I mean, that's just a little gripe. Um, Another one, like you said, I mean, I prefer the weekly, but I mean, I'd have to see, I'd have to binge this and see how I feel. I just like the weekly more because it gives me more time to like rewatch that one episode
Yeah.
and talk about it in detail. Um, but no, like I said, I mean, from the first episode already, I'm loving it, and I can't wait to see what 2, 3, 4, and 5 bring.
Yeah.
Um, like you said, I agree with what you said about the whole, Daredevil fighting Maya. Could have been anyone, and it probably would have been as cool. But I mean, props to both of them for getting this choreography out because this fight scene was
Yeah.
honestly
It
amazing.
was a
I
very good
loved
fight.
the fight scene from beginning to end. It was amazing choreography, and yeah, I just enjoyed it a lot. I can't
Yeah.
wait to see what
And
else it brings.
honestly, as I said, I agree with you in any other context of these shows. I do prefer the week to week genuinely or generally, but in this in particular case, the binge just worked for me. I do see why they put it out the way they did. And I do implore people that are expecting another Daredevil, don't. This is just a far more beautiful story, I think, by the end of it, and something very emotionally told that I thought paid off without giving anything away there. And also, the last thing I will say, it's so weird to me. We get these more mature shows, like you look at Andor and this, and for some reason, because they're more mature, suddenly they're a little bit more visually stunning too than the other kids
True.
shows, and I don't know why that has to equal out to visually better. I
Yeah,
don't know why kids
it's
shows can't be the family fare can't be more. I shouldn't say kids shows as much as the family fare can't be a
yeah,
little bit
right, yeah.
more visually good. Like that's weird to me. Like with the exception of I would say
Or even
Ahsoka.
as like
Yeah.
yeah, true. I mean, I agree with you. I don't know why they can't be as visually good as, TVMA shows.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, because I was watching the beginning of this, like this opens up, you'll know what I'm talking about in like a more fantastical sequence, and I'm like, geez,
Oh
right off the
my
bat,
goodness.
it's
I was gonna
visually
say right
better
off
than
the
most of the stuff on Disney Plus right off the bat.
right
So
right off the bat, it had me like in. Like I was just
yeah,
like the bait was out and it hooked me in straight off the bat. It was just
yeah,
so cinematically beautiful. It
yeah,
was the visuals were just honestly, like you said, one of the best things that is on Disney Plus at the moment. Honestly,
yeah.
it's just
Excellent
so
in that
beautiful,
regard. Excellent in that regard, honestly, and shot very well. Again, the
and
entire show is shot very well.
a lot of those like silent scenes, man, just really get me too, because it just brings me. It reminds me almost of like A Quiet Place in a
Yeah,
sense, with like the deaf girl in that movie. It just kind of brings me to that and how like beautiful those silent scenes are, man. They're just like man,
yeah.
there's silence really like hits different in shows and movies, honestly.
Yeah, the silence scenes were very good. I was very impressed with the sound design and sound mixing. We're
Honestly,
seeing
same.
that used more and more, I think, like a la Quiet Place or Sound of Metal, like I think really started the trend of using this sort of silence. Like it's silent, but there's still sound there to make it sound silent. It's
Hmm.
a weird thing that it's like you set it at a certain frequency so you can like hear silence. It's insane. And I think that this show used it quite a bit in the best regard because again we have a main character. Alec Cox herself is deaf, and
Deaf herself, yeah.
yeah, so deaf and mute, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense in the way
And
that they use
the
it.
fact that like most, if not all, the cast, put it upon themselves to learn ASL for her is
Yeah,
just incredible as well. I mean,
fantastic. Yeah.
that takes that takes extra time out of their day to learn that, and the fact that they decided to do that just makes it even better,
And you could
honestly.
really see in the show why they had to do that in a way. Like
Oh,
they let it serve the story, which I really enjoyed. But
on
I
top of the fact that she is, you know deaf herself, they needed to. they wanted to learn it for her so they could communicate with her as well. But also, like you said too, it serves a purpose for the story, which I will find out eventually. But yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but guys, Echo I thought was enjoyable. I'm still gonna go with a might watch, but it's on the higher end of that, like the highest end of a might watch for me. That's the rating I'm gonna go with here. And I hope that you guys do binge it. Let us know what you think. And it's not gonna be for everybody, and that's fine. It just happened to speak to me and work for me for what it was. I enjoyed watching it. I thought it was a really fun binge. So, especially on a weekday, I thought that was a really nice thing to get. And I think it's a good start for the MCU for myself. Like, I'm excited to see what's next now, even though I was very nervous because of a lot of things that were coming. So, might watch for me. I hope you guys check out Echo. We'll circle back around to Jose when he sees the rest of it. We'll do that on a different podcast. But yeah,